Welcome back to Designing with AI, Part 3. This time we're going to get a little more complex and design something called the Insomnia App. A few years ago during the pandemic, I had a bout of insomnia, and so I tried something called cognitive behavioral therapy for insomnia, or CBTI, and it worked. So I figured, let's try to make an app out of this. So I gave it a command here. You can see generating some content. It was a little too metaphor heavy about a space journey here, the first one. So I said, forget the metaphor, explain the theory, and applied practice. I want this to be practical for folks. And yes, here you go. Here's the cognitive behavioral component. And then the applied practice. This is where the rubber meets the road. It's all about sleep hygiene and something called sleep restriction, which is very counterintuitive, but it works. So then I said, well, how do I do sleep consolidation or restriction without a sleep tracker? It's hard to identify, how long you're asleep versus how long you're awake. And the response was, it doesn't have to be perfect. So I wanted to create an app for folks who didn't have sleep trackers, and they could just input some of their information manually. So create a simple web app that steps between 7 views using previous and next buttons, and I give it the views here. So I took the content, massaged it all into a short digestible course, I guess you might call it, and then I just quickly inputted it into ChatGPT as a directive. Create an app that walks through these 7 modules or views. And the reason I did that is I could create 7 pages and link them together, but it's much easier, as I mentioned in previous videos, to troubleshoot, debug, modify, and edit these mini web apps if it's all in one screen. So often if I have multiple screens, I'll simply put it all on a single page and let CSS showing and hiding of elements, as well as JavaScript to tie them all together logically. And it's really a lot easier than it sounds. It just seems to work out better for these mini apps. Eventually, when the app grows too big, you want to start separating it into pages. But for the purpose of this educational component, we can do it all as one page. I also gave it a little more information. Each view will have a consistent title bar, a paragraph of education, a paragraph of action required, and an option input field. I think it forgives you typos. And then in addition to the previous and next buttons, there will be a progress bar at the top just to keep track of it. So I gave it a brief paragraph of instructions that I might tell a developer, a human. And let's see what it does. Okay, so we can see that something you find out quickly when using ChatGPT for coding or another language model is that it's lazy. In other words, it's been programmed or set up to preserve energy and preserve resources. So it'll often only give you a partial answer and just say, you would do the rest like this. It always seems to default to that. Perhaps there's a way for me to configure a GPT that gets around that. But for now, I simply just say, no, why don't you give me all of the content, and be very specific. And it'll do so. Sometimes it needs a second follow-up nudge even. So here I did that, and it created me 7 what I call stubbed out views. Stubbed out, it's developer speak, meaning you just put placeholder content there until you have the real stuff. And so you can see me trying the app out here, and it's got the stubbed out views. Great, just super short descriptions. Doesn't have all the content I want in it, but the logic works to link together the views. And next, with the magic of fast forwarding film technique here, you can see that I've got my CBTI in Notepad, and I'm just transferring it to all those placeholders. So it's a simple copy and paste. you start to learn, where in the code to look for. There's these elements that are called P's, and they're paragraphs, and so you just copy and paste right in between those paragraphs. There's other little units called divs. You can copy the new titles sometimes between those. So here we go. Sorry, the screen wasn't quite aligned with my video capture, but it renders fine. You can see it's stretching to the full width of the screen. It doesn't look the greatest here, but it works. I got all the content in, and now you can paginate between all 7 areas of the education, which is great. Just a brief aside, my design philosophy tends to be more Millennium Falcon than Imperial Star Cruiser. Yeah, she ain't pretty, but she's got it when it takes. So you can see now here that the content stretches the full width. And so we can make some quick changes to the styling of this file just by going back to ChatGPT. First, we're going to copy all of the code that's in this HTML file. And I just wanted to quickly show you, there's a couple of areas here in the code I wanted to call out just for your own understanding if you're not familiar. There's the style part at the top, and that's CSS. There is the HTML, and then below that is JavaScript, and that is the logic. Right now, we're just worried about the styling of the page. So we're going to copy it all and bring it over to ChatGPT and say, modify the following code at a maximum content width of, let's say, 600 pixels when it's on a desktop. And then we're going to just let it be 100% when it's on a mobile browser. And after that, we paste in our code, and we can see that we get the appropriate adjustments to our style code or our CSS right there. And after the style code is generated here, once again, ChatGPT, preserving energy, simply stubs out the rest of the file, such as the JavaScript and the HTML. It just says existing content here, and that's okay, because it's faster for us. We don't have to wait for it to regenerate stuff we don't need to replace. So we go up and we grab that style and we paste it in to where our style is at the top, and you can see now that it's changed. Still doesn't look awesome, but at least it's more readable when contained, in that kind of almost page-like format. 600, you could arguably do it a little wider, but you get the gist. And you can see here I've modified the titles to be bigger. It's still not looking like anything that will win design awards, but you can see it's starting to be a little easier to read. And we can continue to tweak it in that way. I just wanted to show you that. The other thing I wanted to call out is if you do a right click in your browser and you emulate a mobile device, then you can see that what it looks like, and it should be 100% here, and oh, it's not quite 100%, and it looks super tiny for the font. And so I know what's happening, but I want to show you how to diagnose something like this. So you would simply, once again, copy and paste your existing code, and just go back to ChatGPT and say the text and content is appearing smaller or shrunken in size, and see what it does. And you can see here's the modified code. You can see that it has added something called a viewport meta tag, and so that was the critical piece that we were missing. So that meta tag actually exists outside the style tag. So if you go and look and you see where it's placed right after the title. Okay, so we go and we copy it, and we go back to our HTML file and we paste it in place. And then we can copy all the changed CSS, which actually modifies the font to be slightly smaller when it's on mobile versus desktop, if that's what you want. We can see it works fine here now that we've put in that meta tag, and when I go back to desktop width, it also reacts correctly. So that's it for this lesson. This was a longer one. I hope you learned some more things about interacting, kind of adjusting with the code as you go. And the next lesson or tutorial will cover putting in the additional inputs and actually saving them as data that then gets integrated into the content. So the content's more responsive and less static. Additionally, we might experiment with an image or two and continue styling. Until then, have a good one.